Good evening, everybody. We're continuing our path, finding your path, the path of the just, Mesilas Yesharim, Moshe Chaim Luzzato's step-by-step guide as to rise up in one's spirituality and become close to Kodesh Baruch Hu. I just want to be completely off topic. I just got back, as I was mentioning, from the States. And I want to describe to you a situation that happened to me and something that I learned from it. It's not totally off the topic, but it's certainly not in the Inyan of Nikios in chapter 11 where we are now, and B'ezrat Hashem, after a couple of minutes we will get on with the shir, but I just think it's worth recounting the story. So I was flying to Denver to speak at their 50th commemoration of the founding of the yeshiva. And it's a beautiful place, Denver. I've never been there before, and the yeshiva is absolutely wonderful. It's like a pundok, it's like an oasis in the middle of a desert, a midbar. Beautiful, the atmosphere there's tremendous, the bochrim, you can see we're really happy there, a really great place. Anyway, on my way there, I had to stop in Minneapolis. Now, Minneapolis was my first sort of port of call, I guess you'd call it, a landfall in the United States. And of course, you have to go through immigration. I had a connecting flight, which was something like, I think, 2.5 hours after I landed. I only had hand luggage, so I thought 2.5 hours should be adequate to say the least. So I get into the immigration line, and it's going very slowly. So I take a look at what's going on at the counter, and there's this rookie immigration officer who's got somebody standing behind him with his arms folded, like, sort of. He's like, obviously this guy does not know what he's doing. Now, they're pretty careful anyway, especially since Donald Trump is about to come into power, about who they let into the States as it is. But this, I was standing there an hour and 3/4 later, same line. So by this time, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned. So I asked the people in front of me, do you mind if I've got a plane to catch, I'm going to miss my plane, can I move up? So, 3 or 4 of them very nice, said, yes, fine, no problem, I understand. And then I get to this guy and I said, do you mind if I go in front? He said, no. I said, I'm sorry, I've got a plane to catch, I'm going to miss the plane. He said, well, I've got a business meeting. Now, I don't know, it could be something to do with the fact that I had a beard and a black hat on my head. I'm not going to say. I have no idea what his motivations were. And let's face it, I guess he's within his rights it's his place. He doesn't have to give it up to me. Anyway, so I'm standing there tittering, as they say in Yiddish. I think this is, this is, I'm going to miss the plane. I'm going to miss the plane. And then I realized that what happened is that all the lines which are admitting the US citizens, where they go through pretty quickly, they've now finished bringing all the US citizens in, from not only from our flight, from the flight that came after us, and all of these, how do you say, dalpak in English, these stations, these immigration whatever stands were now free, and so it started to go really quickly. It's like, Baruch Hashem, Shuas Hashem v'cheref ayin, wonderful, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. And I get through there, and I get to the scanner, and I go through the scanner as quickly as I can, and I manage to get to my gate, which is on the other side of the airport, of course, where else? Literally 5 minutes before they close the gate. I say, Baruch Hashem, we made it. And I put my hand in my pocket to find my phone, and it's not there. So I search all of my pockets, I turn all my pockets out, I turn my hand luggage out, it's not there. So what do? I say, sir, I'm sorry, we have to close the flight. All I have in my pocket is Rabbi Aaron Wasserman, who's the Rosh Hashiva of the yeshiva's phone number, and no phone to call him on. I thought, what do? I have to miss the flight. I go back, maybe I left my phone at maybe it's still there, maybe somebody didn't steal it, maybe. So I figured out what must have happened was that in my rush, as I went through the scanners, I probably left it in one of the trays. So I get out of the gate there, just outside the gate. There's this very nice fellow. I think he was probably an Arab, but he was a very sweet guy. He said to me, "Can I I'll give you a ride back to to International." So he said, "Just stick your wheelie, your hand luggage in the back, and we'll be off. So we speed over to International, and it's not there. And all the guys there were very, very nice. They all helped me. We looked through all of the trays, nothing. So now I'm getting a little bit, and he says to me, why don't you go over to the Central, or whatever, some place or other place. He said, maybe it's there. I went over there. No. So he says to me, sir, maybe come back in a couple of days. I'm speaking the following night. Maybe come back in a couple of days, maybe in the lost and found. So at this point I start to get really panicky. And I suddenly catch myself. I said to myself, this is a Nasoyan. This is what you've been learning about for all these years. This is it. There's a Rabbeinu Shalom in the world. What are you panicking for? This is Hashem is running the world, and this is a test. And I thought to myself, the lesson was that being in a Nasoyan, half of being in a Nasoyan is to recognize it's a Nasoyan. A lot of the time we get so verblungered, for tumult, for mixed up, and that we forget there's a Rabbeinu Shalom running the world, and he is putting you in this situation right now. Relax. Okay. So I went back to the other place, nowhere else to go. Oh, sir, we found your phone. It was one of the trays that they hadn't looked in. And then, of course, I turned around and I realized that I'd left my wheelie in the back of the truck, and the guy giving me the ride had now driven to the other side of the airport. Anyway, cut a long story short, they managed to, they have a walkie-talkie between the carts. I stopped another cart. And he called it. The Sachakol, I think what I took away from that is that one of the most difficult things about a Nisoyan is to realize this is a Nisoyan. It's to catch yourself. Because once you realize you're in a Nisoyan, that's half of the accomplishment of being oimid with Nisoyan. Nothing really to do with what we're speaking about, but I just felt I wanted to share that with you. So now we're in the midah of nikiyut, of cleanliness. And we've just been talking about nikiyut in terms of speech, we're talking about nivel peh, bad language. We're talking about inyonim of immorality, promiscuity, and we talked about maisa, which we said even though the actual maisa itself, there's also isurim for anything which is in any way intimate, we went into details, even looking at spending time getting the money back from the lady who's giving you the money back so you can take a look at her. All the isurim that come through maisa, and we talked about dibur, how terrible punishments come to the Jewish people, Rachmana litzlan, through immoral speech. Everybody knows why the kala goes to the chuppah, but anybody who spells it out is menavel peh. And now we've reached the level of, we're just going to finish off here, which is machshava. I spoke about this a little bit last time. B'inyan machshava, kvar omru b'tchilas ha-braisa, Shalanu, at the beginning of this brisa, V'nishmata mikol davar ra, it says that the Torah says, and you should guard yourself from anything which is bad. And Chazal explain that means, in Yuma, Shalo yaharhe adam b'yom v'yavo lidei tuma balayla. It's not just talking about davar ra, it's not just doing the thing, not even just speaking about it, but even a thought. Because a thought brings a person to something where he will become impure at night. For Armun it says, "Hihurei avera koshim me'avera." I think we spoke about this a little bit last time. That thoughts of sin, promiscuity, are worse than the avera itself. It's difficult to understand this. So we spoke a little bit last time we met about the idea of a person is where his thoughts are. A person really is what he thinks. So in a sense, that's your essence. So if that's your essence, then in that sense that it's worse than the Meiser itself, because that's really who you are. That's where you are. It's where you are. It's where you exist. That's the world in which you exist. I think another idea is that we know the Ramchal speaks about it, and Nefesh HaChaim. It's a very well-known idea, the different levels of the neshama, of the soul. Neshama is really a general term, but the neshama has different levels. There are 5 levels. The lower 3 levels are called neshama, ruach, and what's it called? I've forgotten it now. Nefesh, thank you. The nefesh is the lowest level. The nefesh is the level of action. The level of ruach, not unsurprisingly, ruach also means spirit, but it also means wind, is the level of speech. And the level of the neshama is the level of the machshava, of the thought. So, in a sense, that when a person's thoughts are in an improper place, that pagam, that impurity, reaches up to a very, very high place inside him. And even though at that level, the ability for a person to contract tumah, because it's such a high level, the ability for that lowliness, that physicality, is very limited in as much as how far it can really penetrate into those lofty levels of the soul. Nevertheless, the mashal, the parable is given. The idea being that on a beautiful white silk dress or scarf or whatever, even a small speck of dirt is a tremendous pagam. So even though technically the ability for the tumah to penetrate to that level is very, very limited, but nevertheless, because of the level of the elevation and the purity of that level of the neshama, so even a very, very little bit is a big blemish. So that's maybe another idea why the neshama, when the person's which is the level of machshava, that could be considered on one level worse than the meiser itself, because that goes, so to speak, lifnai or lifnim, that goes right to the inside a person, when a person has improper thoughts. So we spoke last week about, again, what is the antidote? The antidote for meiser, the antidote for speech, the antidote for thoughts, and especially for thoughts, is Torah. When a person's mind is filled with Torah, he's purifying his neshama. He becomes on a higher level. The words of Torah themselves enlighten him. They repel, so to speak. They repel the tumah. And we also spoke last week about the idea of barasi yetzer hara ubarasi Torah tavlin. Torah is the tavlin, is the antidote. I also gave this idea that there's an idea that the Torah and the desire for arayos actually come from the same root. Etzel le'umat zeh osa elokim. Hashem makes everything positive and negative. There's light and darkness, in the electricity, positive and negative, evil and good, good and evil. Everything has ets counterpart. Hashem created this world as a duality in that sense. Hashem echad, but the world is a duality of good and bad. So the other end of the pole, and therefore it's connected to it, of arayos is Torah. So Torah, so to speak, really hits right at the root. It's metaken. It sweetens the root. It gets to the root of that problem, of that desire, and it takes that energy that is part of the normal human being, and it channels it and it turns it into Kedusha. The Torah has the ability to channel all of the lower part of a person into something which becomes rarefied, refined, and elevated. And that's the only antidote. There is no other antidote. I mean, I don't know if I need to bring this in here, but you see that the Catholic Church has been riddled for years. I mean, they keep getting away with it. I don't know how they do it, but with scandal after scandal, I don't have to go into details, of these people who are supposed to be holy people, how lowly they are and how depraved they are. Because there's no antidote. There's no tavlin except Torah. So that's what we said. It says here, we just discussed that. Umokam umikra molehu in Mishlei says also Tovas Hashem kol machshavos ra. It's a disgusting thing to Hashem, any bad thoughts. Now again, really, what we just described is, how do people say to me, well, how can you control your thoughts? The answer is you can control your thoughts. It's difficult. Most of the Torah is to do with maasim, with physical actions. Shake a lulav, put on tefillin, keep Shabbos, because the world of action is much more accessible to us. And the world of machshava is much more difficult to access. But Hashem gave us the tavlin, He gave us the antidote. A person, when he's oisik in Torah, and he's enjoying his Torah, and even if he's not enjoying his Torah, but certainly if he is, he's becoming elevated, he's becoming proof against the wiles of the Yetzer Hara, and he's turning all of that natural energy inside him into something very holy. Okay, we're going to move on now. Excuse me. V'hinei, dibarnu mishnei gufei averus chamuros. We've been speaking up to this point about two sins. She'bnei Adam krovim lekoshel ba'anfeihem mipnei rubam shel anofim v'rov netias libo shel Adam b'tavasoi alehem. Up till now, we've been talking about two very famous averas, very widespread averas, which are gezel, theft, and promiscuity. And he explains that people are very close to falling in all of their anfeim, their particular branches, because there are many different aspects of ways that you can go wrong when it comes to problems with gezel and money. We described that in previous sugyas about what gezel is. Gezel isn't just holding up a bank, It's not just walking around with a big bag with swag marked on it. I'm not going to go into it again, but gezel has many, many different facets. And similarly, as we saw, Arias has many facets: thought, action, and speech. So that's one of the reasons why it's very difficult to steer clear of getting yourself into trouble in those areas. And another area, very simply, is because the nature of a person is that he desires these things. A person has a chemda, a desire for money. That's the nature of a person. What money can buy, the power of money, the idea of having money as being something which you see. One of the things they say is money makes the world go round. Money, people are running after money all the time. So that's something which is more difficult because the natural desire is there. And of course, I don't have to tell you, the same is true with Arias. Promiscuity is something that in our society is almost taken as for granted. Where would the advertising industry be without some kind of prurient interest? Films quite gratuitously have some kind of, lady without too many clothes on, and maybe has nothing to do with the plot at all. I mean, people know what sells, and that sells. Why? Because people want it, and therefore to the extent that somebody wants something, that makes it more prevalent for them to fall foul of the Avera. Now we're going to talk about something, the third level, which again, as it says, Rubam, Kulam, Rubam Begezel, and a small amount of them by Arias, and Kulam Beloshen, Avak Loshen Hara. But now the third level we're going to talk about is something which is the Madrega Hashlishi Achre Gezel Vairos Le'inyan Hachemda, and the third level, third degree of desire that people have after money, which is the greatest one, Arias, which is the second. I think the reason why it's second is because the people understand that they used to understand maybe more, there's something intrinsically wrong. There are many ways to kind of justify gezel, to say, well, that's business and everybody does that, etc., etc. It's a little bit more difficult to justify promiscuity. A person knows what he shouldn't be doing. And so therefore, I think it's more common that people fall foul of gezel. But those are the two greatest draws on a person's yetzer. The third one is food. When it comes to desire, is hinehu isur amachalos, forbidden foods. Rav Nosson Schiller once said, it should be well, that if Orthodox Judaism said that a person had to travel around the world eating at all the best 5-star treif Michelin restaurants, a lot more people would be from. The fact of the matter is that a Jew has to restrict what he eats. He can't eat meat or milk. He can't eat things from a behemoth which is tamea. He can't eat things even from an animal which is pure, which has been slaughtered in the wrong way, if it's an animal which requires slaughtering. He can't eat at all on Yom Kippur. He can't eat, chametz on Pesach. You can go through a whole list of things that you can't eat. And eating is a very basic desire, as I don't think we need to, The genius of Judaism is that it manages to, in all of these areas, sublimate that desire. The true sublimation of arayas is marriage. And Baruch Hashem, B'liyan Hara, you see that typically people who keep Taharas Mishpacha, people who keep the laws of Torah, have fresh relationships which are constantly renewing themselves like the moon. And you see people who are involved in Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, Torah Judaism. There's no more pleasure than Shabbos. Shabbos makes the food taste good. It's not the other way around. There's a famous story which I'm sure everybody's heard, but it's worth repeating about Rebbe and Antoninus, who Antoninus was the Roman emperor. I think he's called by secular scholars Marcus Aurelius, but I'm not sure. But Antoninus, we call him Antoninus, and they were friends. And Antoninus once went to have Shabbos with Rebbe, and he said after the Shabbos, the food was so delicious, I'm going to send my chef over to see exactly what goes on in the kitchens. So Rebbe said, Vakasha, you're welcome, or whatever the equivalent was in Latin. And Antoninus sent over his chef, and the chef went around the kitchen, carefully taking down all the different knetchim in the cookery knetchim, and he goes back and he makes the meal exactly punkt the way that the kitchens of Rebbe prepare the meals for Shabbos. The next time they meet, so Rebbe says to Antoninus, he says, "Well, my lord, your highness, how was the food?" He said it was very nice, but it was lacking something. So Rebbe said, he says, "I know why that is." He says, so Anthony says, "Why is that?" He says, "Because you were missing the magic ingredient." So Anthony said, "What do you mean? Why didn't you tell me what the secret ingredient is? I sent my chef, and you keep the secret ingredient away from him." He said, "Your Majesty, the secret ingredient is Shabbos. It's not the food that tastes Shabbos, makes the Shabbos taste good. It's Shabbos that makes the food taste good." And anybody knows this. I think if you talk to anybody who became religious, it's my experience, and maybe we can. But my experience is that almost everybody that I spoke to who became frum was because of Shabbos. Because there's something about Shabbos which is the elevation of the physical. Shabbos is the most. This is something that the non-Jews in the Roman times as well have criticized the Jews for. The holiest day of the week, and what do? You sit around eating. And, without going into too many details, other sides of the relations, and husband and wife, this is the day, the most physical day of the week. And the genius of Judaism is that it's a machine which turns physicality into spirituality. Nobody else does this. For a non-Jew, the only thing they understand is to restrict, to cut off, to be a monk, to cut it off. You have to slice out that old part of yourself. Only a Jew knows how to take the physical world and to elevate it and to have the true internal pleasure of being able to sublimate the most physical things in a person's life into something which is the most holy. It's a miracle. It's absolutely amazing. By the by, there's an interesting halacha. Non-Jews were permitted to bring korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know if you know that. But they were only allowed to bring one kind of korban, which was a korban ola. And ola is translated into English, it really means to go up, an elevation offering. But it's also translated as a burnt offering. Why? Because with an ola, everything goes up. The mind of a non-Jew is that if I'm bringing a sacrifice, I want to see it all go up. The concept of the Kohanim ochlim, the Kohen eat, which they do in all the other korbanos pretty much. HaKohanim ochlim, v'habailim miskaprim, and the bailim, the person who brings the korban, gets the kapara. That's something which just the non-Jewish mind doesn't fathom. It's like, hello, I mean, your priests are getting a kickback over here. Hello, I want to see that go up. That's my sacrifice there, chum. What are you doing eating it? So this idea of the ability, of the most physical thing in the world to eat, that a Kohen eats that sacrifice, that korban, and that's what causes the kapara. That's what really is the essence of the kapara. That's something which... So, we're talking about food, and as we said, it's the third level, and there are many areas of food that a person has to steer clear of. We said before, bein be'inyan hatreifos atzmam, whether we're talking about treif themselves, bein be'inyan taruvosehen, mixtures, forbidden mixtures of or the whole sifim in Shulchan Aruch about what's permitted and not what's not permitted in terms of mixtures of forbidden and permitted foods. Bein be'inyan bas v'cholov, milk and meat, which is a chok of the Torah. Why should that be also? It's also to eat them together, to cook them together, or to even have pleasure from them. You can't even take something which let's a McDonald's cheeseburger and sell it to a goy, or even give it to his dog, because he's going to be makir tov to you for doing that. He's going to have appreciation. That's called osa bahano. You're not allowed to have any benefit from it at all. Or chelev of forbidden fats, and chelev and shuman, which are permitted fats, look absolutely identical. There's no difference at all. The only difference is where they, I don't know if the word is grow, where they are on the animal's body. Very similar. V'dam, blood, v'inyan bishuleyakum, as we know that food cooked by a non-Jew is also prohibited for a Jew to eat. V'inyan gi'ule akum, or cooking using a non-Jew's utensils. Yain nichsom, yain nesech, which is literally the wine that they poured out for their idols. V'stam yainom, or stam yainom means wine which was not used for libations, I think is the correct English term, but was touched by a non-Jew. V'shar usur echila, and all the other prohibitions of eating and drinking. Kol eleh ha-nikius, these all require nikius. That's, remember the chapter we're talking about, how a person gets himself clean, cleans himself out from any contact with these things. So this tzarech dikduk gadol, it requires tremendous precision. But tzarech chizuk, and of course, requires a person to strengthen himself. Ki yesh tavas halev, hamis'aver, because there's the desire of the heart, which desires macholim matovim, for good food, as we said before. Mishle, v'chesron hakis, and the other side of it is that a person, when he goes into a kosher butcher and he sees that the meat is considerably more expensive than, what's Patrick's, the butcher next door, this is a nisoya for a person. Chesron kus is going to cost me more money. Be'isure v'hatarofos, in the issa of things which are mixed together, being very careful with heksherim, even things which look like maybe, what can be wrong with that, people often say. But especially nowadays, this is a massively complex topic, because virtually everything which is produced, any food which is produced, has tremendously different amounts of of different ingredients, some of which may come from non-kosher animals. So anything which is not the thing itself, anything which you get out of a packet, anything where you've got this big chart at the back of all you'll see, 51 different ingredients, anything like that has to have a reliable heksher. So it's not just going into the fish market, fishmonger, and seeing if the fish has got fins and scales. It becomes tremendously complicated, And as food technology becomes more sophisticated, it becomes increasingly more complicated. And of course, that's what that's why food with a hechsher costs money, because this is, an expensive operation. Now, you'll forgive me, it seems to be we're telling a lot of stories tonight, but that's okay, I guess. So I want to tell you a story that I heard secondhand, and as secondhand stories go, secondhand is pretty good. I mean, I heard it from the person who heard it from the person that happened to. We're talking about here yain nesech, wine which is poured out as a libation to a pagan god. So this chavruso I had Moshe Avrik, Zeichet Tzaddik Livrocha, he passed away. So he told me he had this friend who was a businessman, Jewish businessman, and he had some business dealings with some non-Jews, and I think they were maybe even in business together. And they were in Los Angeles, and they went to all together. They had to have this business meeting at this very sort of chintzy nouvelle cuisine restaurant down there on Melrose, which is like where they serve you 3 peas and a microscope to see what you're eating. And but he said, I'm sorry, I can't hear. So, oh yeah, we know kosher, we understand kosher. And then so the wine came around. So he said, I'm sorry, I can't drink the wine. He said, what? Wine? It's not pig. Well, it's wine. What's? He said, well, we have a halacha, a law, Jewish law, that says that we cannot drink wine because it may have been used as a libation for idols, for avodah zarah, for pagan idol worship. So they kind of laughed at it. Do me a favor, this is 2023. There are no pagans, there are no idol worshipping. So just at this moment, this kind of this waiter who was extremely gender challenged came out, and in sort of rather a mincing tone, he said to me, "Oh, excuse me, gentlemen, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, and I just want to tell you that before I serve the wine, I always pour out a little bit to my God in the kitchen." And their faces went like this. So, okay, you'll say, do me a favor, 2024, 2023, whenever this happened, actually it was a few years ago, but Chazal understood what they were doing when they made very strict laws about what we can and what we cannot eat. Okay, I think we're going to pause here tonight because I don't want to make the sections too indigestible. Sorry for the pun. But let's just see, where do we get to this? Have we got a good place to pause here? I think we can stop here. Yeah, I think we can stop here. We'll pick up. Let's not Hashem next week. All the best.